Special thanks to Mike Phalin of fanbolt.com for helping to arrange this interview. And I'm here now with actor, writer, comedian, star of the films The Hollywood Knights, Batman, Cobb, Bull Durham, the television series Arliss, Mr. Robert Wuhl. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this for me.
My pleasure.
You were in two of my favorite films of all time, and a couple of those I would really like to ask you about. One is your first film, this movie from 1980 called The Hollywood Knights. I love movies, of course, like the classics like Animal House, American Graffiti. Hollywood Knights, of those kind of movies, was honestly the one that I grew up with the most. And I'm sure you have a lot of people bringing up different movies you've done to you, and TV as well, between Batman, Bull Durham, and Arliss. Is it very often that The Hollywood Knights gets brought up to you?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I would say outside of Batman and Bull Durham, that gets brought up the most. It's a big cult film. Also, what happened was, it was one of the first movies that went into rotation on HBO early.
Yes.
And so it was on over and over and over. And fathers would then, in their 1980, would watch it with their sons and laugh. It was something a father and son could watch together. Now what's happened, I've found, is the next generation of fathers have grown up. Those kids have grown up, and now they're watching it with their sons. So yes, people, I do get brought up. I had the governor of the state of New Jersey one time come up to me at a Yankee game and only wanted to talk about the Hollywood Knights. This is the governor of the state. So that was very funny. But yeah, no, outside of Batman and Arliss, I would say that gets asked about the most. That
is so cool. And that's a great point, because I grew up, when I was born in 81. So growing up then in the 80s, it was my parents who I grew up watching that movie with. What was it between all these scenes in the movie, between your character Nubom Turk, the Volare scene, and different pranks going on in the film? What was that kind of like to get into the mind of this character, this prankster Nubom Turk?
Well, it was my first job in movies. And I was very fortunate that Floyd Mutrux, the director, cast me in this thing, and that he allowed me to improvise a lot of stuff and play. I mean, originally Volare wasn't even the song, it was Shaboom. And I didn't know how to make that work rhythmically, and then I said, where are we putting the farts in on Shaboom? Where are you putting this Shaboom, Shaboom,
Yeah.
I said, if you had Volare, you had a pause. And so he said, okay, go with that. And I was very fortunate. It was just a lot of fun, a lot of great talent. Fran Drescher's was in it, Michelle Pfeiffer's first film, Tony Danza's first film, mine, Mike Binder. I mean, a lot of us were very fortunate, and Floyd gave us carte blanche. As crazy as Floyd could be, I owe him a great debt of gratitude.
You all had really good chemistry in the movie. Like, it really felt like these are a group of young people and friends who have known each other a while. That kind of chemistry really showed in that movie. Have you and some of the other actors or people behind the scenes been able to kind of keep in touch, or do you see much of each other over the years since the making of that movie?
Well, one character, one guy, P.R. Paul, who played, I think Wheatley was his name, or whatever his name was, who later went on TV at Fame and did some movies. He and I have become close friends and have stayed close friends all those years. Mike Binder and I were comics together, and we've kept in touch a little bit. Tony Danza and I see each other occasionally. Fran and I see each other occasionally. I ran into Michelle Pfeiffer about a year or two ago. So that's about the extent of it, really. But no, not yes and no. So that's the answer to your question. With PR Paul, yes. Paul, yes.
Did any of you guys get to keep any of the jackets from the film?
Oh yeah, I still have my jacket.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool. I see them at conventions every now and then. Like there'll be booths that have jackets and outfits going along with certain movies, certain cults movies. I've seen a Hollywood Knights jacket a couple of times.
Really?
Yeah. And some posters for the film as well. What do you think? Have you ever thought, like, What do you think became of the character of New Bum Turk post like the events of that movie, with the movie taking place in the mid 1960s? Has that thought ever kind of come across your head? What you think like maybe became of this guy once he went into more so adulthood over the years?
Well, I haven't really thought much about it, but I would think, no, I really haven't. I really haven't.
No, that's cool. No, that's totally cool. And I'd love to ask you some here about Batman, with it being the 30th anniversary of Batman this year, which time flies. When you were... that movie to me is the gold standard for that kind of movie, for a superhero film, for a comic book film. Ever since seeing it in the theater that summer when I was a kid, it's been one of my favorite movies of all time since then. Did you have a vibe on set for that film when you were in that movie that this movie would have the lasting power that it has, and certainly be very influential to the comic book films that came afterwards?
Good question. Did I have a vibe? I thought it would be unique. This is all Tim Burton, though. This is all Tim Burton. I thought it was unique. I was hoping it would be a big success. I thought it had a chance. I thought at the time, the movies that were making a lot of money, I remember doing Scrooge had come out a couple of months earlier, maybe the Christmas before. Ghostbusters 2 had come out just before. So I was gauging it against them, and I thought we would do at least as well. It's funny you say it's the gold standard, and I imagine it is for a certain generation.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a younger generation, it's probably not, but for a certain generation, it is. Because times change, tastes change. I still think it's a really terrific movie. In fact, I've said this before, that I think when you take the first incarnation of those Batman movies, and I'm saying the Tim Burton 2 and the Joel Schumacher 2, I'm not going to count The Dark Knight, that's later.
Yeah.
If you put them end to end, I think each hour of the series got progressively worse.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first hour of the first Batman movie is really quite remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
The second hour is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And then from there, it starts to, each hour gets progressively worse, in my opinion.
You're right about the way that generations are. A friend of mine and I were talking the other day how our favorite summer of movies was that 89 summer of movies between Batman and License to Kill and Last Crusade. And this was certainly an era of movies that had such quotable characters, memorable characters, like in a real like ensemble of really memorable actors and memorable characters and lines from movies like Batman to RoboCop to the Indiana Jones movies. We quote Batman all the time, and and a lot of those are Knox quotes. Like whenever my buddy Rob Walker and I when we get asked a question about a number and the answer is 6, we'll say a Knox line like, "Oh yeah, 6 is good." Do you have any particular quotes from that movie, or really any of your other films in general, that you kind of go back and find yourself quoting the most, just maybe like in a conversation, or that might spring to your head?
Never quoting in a conversation.
Sure.
Now, the only thing that does come up is that if friends of mine are getting married and I have to give them a wedding gift, it's easy because of the candlesticks in Bull Durham.
Yeah.
That's easy, because they almost expect that from me.
Mm-hmm.
So that one would be the easiest one out of all of them. I don't really think about me quoting. I mean, the one I get a chuckle at, there's a few I probably get a chuckle at. The King of the Wicker People is kind of fun that Tim kept it in. It's all Tim. It's all Tim Burton. I mean, it's 90% Tim Burton. I have to give credit to John Peters and Peter Guber, because they produced it and they hired Tim and Mark Canton. And as much as I know that Tim, at first, really was opposed to the Prince music, being in the show, it worked. Mm-hmm. As much as people forget also the backlash when Michael Keaton was announced that it was announced that he was going to be Batman. People forget that this is a different generation now. The backlash to this was horrible. Thank God there was no social media, because the fanboys back then were dead against him. I mean, it wasn't like 50-50. It was like 95-5, if even that. He was Mr. Mom to a lot of people. And so people forget, or just didn't know, how bad the backlash was to Michael Keaton as Batman. They don't know that. They don't remember that. And indeed it was. Indeed it was. Now, I was not a fan of the Adam West TV series. To me, it was much too jokey, much too campy for my taste. Mm-hmm. And when I saw what Tim was doing, I said, this is more like for me. And I like that because it was darker. It was much darker, but it still had a hint of fun to it. Mm-hmm. It was still fun to it, which would be my only personal reservation about the Dark Knight series, which is they're really good, but there's no fun to them. Right. It's not fun. It's a different take. So, but Batman with Jack Palance, and there was fun. There was fun to that. There's no fun to the Dark Knight series. Now, we're living in a different time, and it's post 9/11, and I understand that. This is just a personal opinion.
Oh, no, it had a great dark sense of humor to it. The dark Gothic style and everything mixed in with lines that you and Kim Basinger have. Also, like, really great instances of dark humor with Nicholson with that deadly hand buzzer, and he shakes that guy to death. Like, like you're right. Like a really cool, twisted sense of humor like that the film has. Did you? And I remember, even being 8 years old back then, I remember the backlash that Michael Keaton got when it came out. And me being that young, I was excited because this was not long after Beetlejuice, which was one of my favorites back then when I was a kid growing up, and Mr. Mom as well. I remember being excited about Michael Keaton being cast, and to this day, he's still my favorite Batman. To this day, it's still my favorite Batman movie.
Yeah, but you were 8 years old.
You're right. I mean, I grew up with the film. Yeah.
You were 8 years old. If you were 28, you may not have thought the same thing.
It'd be one of the newer ones. Or the Batman the movie from the 60s with the shark repellent.
that stuff I didn't care for. I'm trying to think of a comparable piece of casting to nowadays. I'm trying to think. I won't go so far to say Seth Rogen. Mm-hmm. Because Michael did have more. He had done Clean and Sober, and I knew Michael because of the comic, and I knew what a good actor he was. I don't want to say Seth. Seth might be a little bit, but I'm trying to think of another comic actor who, of that time or of now, would be comparable to what Michael had to do back then. I'm trying. Like I said, Seth comes to mind.
I remember
Steve Carell's older, but that's sort of the way. And Steve Carell's already done darker stuff, but that's a comparable. If you say Steve Carell's going to be Batman, but a younger Steve Carell, or Will Ferrell, something like that. That's the and Will's also older now, but that's a comparable to what Michael Keaton was going through.
I even see it a lot with a lot of people cast as Batman in general, like outside of like a comic actor, like right now with Robert Pattinson being cast, and there's I'm looking forward to it. There's back and forths on that. Same with when Ben Affleck was cast, and Heath Ledger when he was first cast as the Joker. I remember seeing a lot of arguments about that online. I saw you on Twitter asking if Alexander Knox were to be in the next Batman movie, who you were asking people who they would like to see cast. Me personally, I'd love to see you come back to play Alexander Knox again. But would you have an actor in mind, like, say it was someone else playing the character of Alexander Knox, and if Knox was in this next movie, would you have someone in mind that you would really like to see their interpretation of that character?
Well, I got to think about the context.
True.
I have to think, because if you're looking at, somebody around 30 years old.
Yeah.
Who, hey, it might be a woman now. You know, it's another way. Well, of course, she could have a crush on Vicky Vale. Why couldn't she?
Right.
It was, well, Seth Rogen. I mean, would have been probably about the right person right about then. I mean, that would have been sort of the type. I would think. But again, I don't know. It depends how you go. I could also see, like I said Seth Rogen. I could also see Mindy Kaling playing it. They go another way. I mean, it all depends on the context. Yeah,
it does. And I was thinking, so, like, if not you, Seth Rogen was about the first one that came to my head. Excuse me, that cough back again. Did you ad-lib the King of the Wicker People line?
Yes.
Very cool. That's one that we quote a lot too, especially when we see some mannequins like in a.
But again, I have to give credit to Tim Burton for keeping it in.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of directors don't do that. They won't do that. It's like, we always stuck to the script, but occasionally he let me play.
Do you remember any other parts in the movie that were like some really good ad libs that were kept in?
The line about "Is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City" was written.
Yeah.
But then the other line, and if so, what's he pulling down after taxes? That was an ad lib line.
That's one of my favorite lines. That was in the trailer too. That's a great line. Do you have any projects? Coming up?
Yeah, but they're so far away and everything else. Actually, the thing I'm doing on this weekend, I'm going to San Antonio for Fan Fest. I've never done one of these before.
Oh, really?
And I'm very excited about this. There's going to be like 40,000 people there. They're having the Avengers there and having Aquaman and all these people there. So I'm kind of excited. It's the 30th anniversary of Batman, and also that I'm doing Terrificon in Connecticut in August. So those two, I'm looking forward to these because you get to meet the people and you hear like talking to you.
Yeah.
You get to hear because you don't realize at the time how these movies have touched people, and even though you're a transient part of it, I mean, yeah, I'm in the movie and it was a job and everything, but you for whatever reason you did touch people, and the movie touched people, and they're happy to see you, and that's a cool feeling. I have to say, that's a cool feeling, especially this many years later.
Cons are a lot of fun. I do a lot of them a year, and they're a total blast. Just especially if you like you said, especially if you like talking to people, like telling stories, talking about these movies, getting to know fans and everything. Robert, thank you so much for your time. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and it was really, really cool hearing these stories about these movies that are still some of my favorites to this day. And I hope you have a great time at these conventions coming up. And I look forward to seeing more of you in the future, too. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. I hope to see you at one of these conventions.
Yeah, definitely. I would love that. That would be really cool.
Okay, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Have a great week.